Pluto in Aquarius. In this video, I'm going to show you some details about this very significant transit, this ingress, what we call, or the entry of Pluto into Aquarius. In technical terms, it's called an ingress. And it is a very important and significant event for us all. And when I say us all, I'm talking about the entire planet. And Earth, that is. Pluto is a very interesting planet, which I'm going to share more insight about. You know, most people who have any inkling or notion of astrology at all know that Pluto is a powerful player on the stage, regardless of the fact that it's very small and distant, and regardless of the fact that it's been reclassified as Plutino, what is in fact, you know, kind of a dwarf planet, actually. So in some regards, it's been kind of looked upon as demoted, but rest assured, it still has a great power. And the whole study of astrology and the synchronicity of when a planet transits through a sign is very evident, very obvious for those who can see it for what it is. For example, Pluto entered Capricorn back in 2008, and right then we had a major economic issue on the planet, right coinciding with it, and in the sign of Capricorn, it was destined to have a transformational effect on governments. And sure enough, over the past, almost 15 or so years, it has had a very transformational effect, somewhat in the negative, where governments have become more tyrannical, some would say. Not everybody would agree on these things entirely, but more heavy-handed, and things we saw with COVID, for example, was a good example of it, all a part of the synchronicity. Now, one of the things to understand about Pluto is it's a rather complex little dwarf planet with no less than 5 moons. Go figure. So where Pluto is about the size of our moon, if not a little smaller, it itself has 5 moons. What's particular about one of them, Charon in particular, is that they orbit around each other. So there's this very kind of spin wheel principle that one might describe of Pluto and Charon, while the other 4 moons, Styx, Nix, Kerberos, and Hydra, all orbit at a bit further distance away. So a very interesting little planetary system, one might say, with, we only have one, a large one, of course, moon, but Pluto in its dwarf and size and very far distance, about 1/3 of a day at the speed of light away from the sun. The entire solar system's the distance of the speed of light for 1 day, it's been estimated, is the reach of the sun's energy field. So Pluto's about 1/3 the distance, about 8 hours at the speed of light. So that's quite a distance, isn't it? But when we think of astrology in a holistic sense, we can understand that the entire solar system can be best understood as a whole, as a system, as a unit. And when we think of it that way, we no longer kind of believe or perceive the planets in our solar system to be as far as it may seem. For example, while Pluto may be 8 hours at the speed of light away, and the reach of the sun's energy field is the day at the speed of light for 1 Earth day, or 24 hours, the closest star to us, the Alpha Centaurus, is 4.22 light years away. So you get a little bit of a ratio perspective there to realize, in that regard, if the closest star to our star, the sun, is 4.22 light years away, and Pluto's 8 light hours, or this light, the distance light travels in 8 hours, well, it's something to the tune of about 9,500 100 times further away to the closest star. So that's just a bit of a background, and Pluto plays this very, very special role in astrology as the modern ruler of Scorpio, along with its cohort Mars. They're a dynamic duo, all right, just like Batman and Robin, one might say, in a very dynamic and powerful, assertive, aggressive, transformational, principle that is behind them, and all aligned with the sign of Scorpio, the most enigmatic of all signs of the zodiac, the sign of death, taxes, reincarnation, death and rebirth, in other words, goes into regenerative principles. But basically, when Pluto makes a transit to a sensitive point, we experience some form of transformation, some form of death and rebirth, very phoenix-like. Now, in the course of this video, I'm going to show you some details. So I just want to kind of give you a couple of little graphic images to set the right brain in motion, but I will share with you some actual details of the charts of Pluto entering Aquarius, and we'll have a look at the whole perspective. So let's do that. All right, so here is a chart of Pluto about to enter Aquarius on March 23rd, 2023, which it did. I'm going to use Greenwich as the 0 hour for the planet, so it's kind of the mean middle point for all of the countries of the world. So we use this as a standard perspective, just to kind of find the mean average middle point between all the time zones on the planet. And I'll be presenting the whole perspective from that of what's called the natural zodiac, where Aries is the sign on the ascendant and all the house cusps are equal. So this is called a solar chart based on the natural zodiac, okay? Now, so I'm going to animate, and you're going to see some animations as we go along. And oops, it jumped out of full screen. Sorry about that. It need not happen all the time that I just opened the animation. So I just clicked it by 1 minute there. So we're still March 23rd, 2023, but 1 minute later than the first image. I just wanted to show you Pluto just prior to entering Aquarius. Now, what's significant about this back there in the spring of 2023 was, in light of the whole chart, what we're seeing are a stellium of planets in Aries. This is very, very significant. So always in Western astrology, at least, we look at the planet in question. In this case, it's Pluto. And from the standpoint of the natural zodiac, it's the planet of highest elevation, which is very significant in any person's chart, by the way. And we also look at the sun. Where's the sun? And by extension, we start looking at all the other planets, and certainly the moon plays a key role all the time as well. So what we're seeing here are 5 planets in Aries, no less than Sun, Mercury, Chiron, Jupiter, and the moon. So the moon was new shortly before, kind of a couple of days prior to this, right on spring equinox. It just so happens there was a new moon. But the more important point is Pluto entering Aquarius, and exactly at that moment would create what's called an ingress chart. The ingress chart offers us sort of a sense of its core purpose and likely expression. Now, the tricky thing is that Pluto will exit Aquarius again over in June of 2023 and re-enter Capricorn, where it has been ever since. So I'll show you that in a moment. But the main thing for now is just simply that at the moment that Pluto entered Aquarius, we had this stellium of planets in Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, the sign of new beginnings, pioneering initiatives, fresh starts, the dawn moment in the morning. Just as we see the sun about to rise over the horizon due to the chart moving in this counterclockwise way, based on the spin of the Earth's axis. Now, what's really also interesting is Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars at that time was in Gemini, and significant as that is on its own ground, because Mars is in the sign that is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in the sign ruled by Mars. That's a good thing. That is considered a very good aspect to have. It's mutual reception is the key phrase, the technical term. When two planets are in each other's sign, they're considered to be in mutual reception, which helps the expression of those energies. So it was off to a good start on the high side. Mars at 29 degrees, though, is at a critical degree. So there's, this principle of overcoming linked to a 29-degree planet. So there's something to be overcome. And since we're dealing with Pluto and Mars being the rulers for Scorpio together, they're playing a significant role. Also, you'll notice that Pluto and Mars are in aspect. They're in an inconjunct aspect. It's what's called a lower inconjunct because Mars, being the faster of the two planets, is moving towards the opposition point. So an inconjunct is what's called a 150-degree aspect, and it's very much about making adjustments, making improvements, having to overcome something. And with the Sun and Mercury in Aries, and Mercury also closely aligned, well, close enough with Chiron and Jupiter especially, this generally refers to what can be described as a healing of our identity. So the very first entry of Pluto into Aquarius is very significant on the basis that it's the first official chart and it has a core theme and it represents the healing of our identity. And because we say we're looking at this in a generic perspective, we can then refer this whole theme and perspective to humanity as a whole. Okay, that would be the idea, because when you're looking at the generic placement of the planets in its own way, we're looking at it from the perspective of our collective experience. Now, it is true that every country, by the way, is governed by their own astrology charts. I say charts in a plural sense because every country, for example, has its own birth chart. Then every city in that country will have its own birth chart. And that's where we would take this chart, for example, or any transit chart and apply it to those national birth charts or the city birth charts or even the provincial or state birth charts. So it's a very complex series of things. So it generally, therefore, suggests a generic perspective for all of us, core themes, but how they'll play out is subject to the specific karma of the various nations of the world and the states, provinces, and cities within them. Territories as well, of course. So that's just a bit of background on what's called mundane astrology, the astrology of nations. But I'm saying it because I want to give you this collective wide-angle perspective. So the main point here is that the Aries principle, especially with Chiron sitting pretty much at the midpoint between the sun and the moon, no less, right, with Mercury, Jupiter on either side as well, flanking Chiron, sitting right in the middle, really brings attention to it as a main thing and theme. And Chiron in Aries itself is very much the healing. Chiron's known as the wounded healer, the healing of identity, which is very much Aries. By extension, Aries is symbolic of self-expression, but also authenticity. Aries is very much about be who you are. It's the I am sign. I am myself. I am authentic. I express myself in a very natural, spontaneous way. As the baby of the zodiac, you might say, the first sign, there's this childlike quality of innocence and spontaneity, and it's very raw at that level. But keywords like authenticity and our identity, a sense of the I am, is a very important principle. And you can go on with examining this. So I invite you to go and explore the whole archetype of Aries more fully to understand. So what we're seeing then is the whole chart. Meanwhile, Saturn and Neptune in Pisces over in the solar 12th house do represent a very kind of disintegration process of the old order, is a basic good description of it, especially because they're in the fourth quarter, which is in this case in the natural zodiac always governed by Capricorn. So everything in this quadrant is colored by in this case 0 Capricorn, and it's one of the various perspectives one can take to get a whole understanding. So yeah, the 12th house being the sign of the unconscious, the collective unconscious, but it's also known as the sign and house of undoing. So it's disintegrating the old order which Capricorn represents. Pluto comes in to revolutionize it. Okay, and I say that Pluto's transformational and regenerative. Okay, so it renews based on a death and rebirth principle. That's very significant. But Aquarius itself is very future oriented, very revolutionary. It wants to, and we often think of Aquarius as sort of friendly and the very supportive and uplifted and high vibration sign, and that's all true. But it's also in its determination to express itself, it can be very violent. You should make no mistake of that. Aquarius is a very unpredictable, it's like the sign of hurricanes, if you like. It's very big and powerful, and it's chaotic at worst. It's a very hard to explain quickly, but it's a very dynamic, forceful, revolutionary impulse that destroys, in fact, the old. So Pluto in Aquarius is very much like a Shiva force, a destroyer, and in Aquarius it will do it in a very revolutionary way. So you kind of get an idea of what the synchronicities are going to be about. Now, it is true, just PS, that the Pluto will be in Aquarius for 20 years. Now, in this chart, we're seeing it early on, and it will retreat back, as I'm going to show you in a moment. But the last thing I want to show you is this, in particular, this North Node with Venus and Uranus all creating their own little stellium, 2 or more planets. But this is not a planet, it's the North Node. But in astrology, the North Node is very, very significant. So this is a little conglomerate, little stellium of energy. And in Taurus, what's really positive about that is it represents, especially as the North Node, which means the South Node is Scorpio, it implies the polar opposite sign. It implies a rebuilding, a restructuring, new foundations. So all of which is sort of on the high side, despite the disruptive themes here, the very Aries, new impulse, new day, pioneering, breaking new ground. Really, that's what Aries is all about. It's about entering new territory in a pioneering way, and it can be very assertive, even aggressive. Aquarius is very revolutionary and seeks to kind of overthrow the old order, which has at worst become corrupt and decrepit and so forth. Pluto brings a regenerative energy to it all, so it's explosive. Pluto is kind of like a bottom liner in the sense that it gets right to the bottom of things. So it'll, leave no stone unturned, and that hurricane kind of principle connected to Aquarius in its more dire reaches of its whole archetypal expression is really the big thing to be aware of. And of course, and it's important to note that Uranus here is the ruling planet for Aquarius. So it has and continues to be a big planet to watch over the entire 20-year period while Pluto is in Aquarius. So in other words, what we call dispositor, the planet that rules the sign is receiving the energy directly from Pluto. So it becomes a very active player on the stage. So whatever sign it's in this case, Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, it is very much a rebuilding. So we can look at that as a positive thing. There's an optimism here. But what I'm partially trying to say is that it sort of looks like that our whole planet, especially with our, on the obvious level of modern technology, etc., it's going to undergo a global reset process. Okay, by the time this 20 years is over, and it could be tumultuous, and we would be wise by and large to not demonize and to engage in as positive as we can a spirit of cooperation, but that does not mean necessarily, of course, cooperate with evil or tyranny, but to cooperate with a larger process of creating a world for everybody, which maybe perhaps would lend to third and second world countries, for example, rising up, and first world countries sort of meeting them somewhere in the middle, so that everybody has abundance and prosperity at a level, at least not with that they'll always be everybody will have the same amount of money. That won't happen. But what we can go with is that at least people aren't in dire straits of poverty, at least not at the scale that they are to this day. So there's some insights just on the initial influence and look at the Ingress chart of Pluto in Aries. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to when Pluto re-enters Capricorn briefly, just to have a little peek at that. It's not as important, but I'm going to do it anyway, which occurred in June. Then I'm going to flip over more specifically to the coming entry of Pluto into Aquarius on the 20th of January 2024. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at, by this time it's May the 1st, and Pluto has stationed, so it appears to be stopped in the sky for the very careful observer, because Pluto is slow in its orbit around the sun after all, 247 or so, 246 year period. As I click on, you'll see the moon move. Each click is 1 day later, and Pluto has now entered its retrograde. So I'm going to speed that up a little bit over until when Pluto is about to enter into Capricorn. Again, there it is in some places it was June 10th, in other places it was June 11th. It's just very close margin. Okay, so we won't worry too much about that. The main point is around June 10th or 11th, depending where you were on the planet, Pluto re-entered Capricorn. And interestingly enough, we won't go into this chart too much, but it's interesting that Venus and Mars were conjunct. But it's less the point at this moment. We want to see more when it will enter Aquarius. So I just want to briefly show you. Okay, what I wanted to do first of all, now we're on January 19th on this chart. Okay. Specifically, I wanted to show you just prior to this Pluto entering Aquarius, but I am specifically interested in the fact that the Sun will form a conjunction with Pluto first. Okay, so we're going to go forward by a margin of hours. So you'll see some movement, especially with the moon here. So you're seeing every click. Now, what's so significant is see Pluto sitting at 29:57 minutes. There's 60 minutes in a degree, so it's only 3 minutes away from entering Aquarius again, which it will do on the 20th. But what I want to show you in particular is the fact that the Sun is forming a conjunction to Pluto, and it will in fact hold that position. Watch this. So what I'm going to show you ever so closely here is that to the exact, now we're going by minutes now. Now, so what's so interesting about this is that the Sun will, right there, the Sun is forming a conjunction. So it's January 20th in Greenwich, England, 1:45 p.m. and the Sun and Pluto are forming a conjunction in Capricorn at the 29th degree 59 minutes. That means the very last minute of Capricorn is activated by this conjunction. Every time there's a conjunction of two planets, it creates a new cycle. So there's always cycles being created all the time. But what we're specifically interested in is this Pluto-Sun conjunction. So I'm going to click one more minute, and you're going to notice that they're still conjunct. So people are saying, by the way, that there's the Sun and Pluto are conjunct in Aquarius, which in a way they are. It's true within the margin of degrees when the Sun enters Aquarius, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But technically, the conjunction is not in Aquarius with Sun and Pluto. It is in Capricorn, and it's at the last degree. In astrology, this is very significant. It's very important. It's technically accurate. The Western astrology is based on the sun's light and the Gregorian calendar, and the science behind measuring the exactitude of the light on the earth and so forth is very high science. Okay, it's an old kind of endeavor of science, but it was kind of a cutting edge of science to develop that keen and precise observational ability from the Earth's perspective. It's very, very precise mathematics at play here and involved with the astronomy. So the key thing to understand is in Western astrology, and due to the Gregorian calendar, actually, the precision of accuracy is very, very, very high. Okay, so you can look that up as you wish. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead here. You'll notice, you just saw the Sun enter Aquarius. Hang on for a second. I'm going to back up just a little bit to show what happened there. So it's right there. There was the conjunction with Pluto, but then the Sun enters Aquarius. It's January 20th, 2:08 p.m. Okay, you see that? Now, what I'm going to do is speed this up by hours, as we're going to watch Pluto. Remember, it's very slow. So watch the moon as I click hours. Okay, there's the first one. You'll see it moving by degrees here if you want to see. But what I'll do is move along. So we're already late at night, and it's technically already the 21st of January in Greenwich. And of course, that means everywhere east of Greenwich, all the way to New Zealand, for example, it's already the 21st. So where the Sun technically enters Aquarius on the 20th in Greenwich and east of, Pluto is only going to enter Aquarius here in the west especially, but even in the east, at least in Greenwich, once again, on the 21st. So this is kind of a technical, nobody really cares, but it does actually matter in terms of the finer distinctions. Now, so there it is. So what we're really seeing here is that at that exact moment, it's at this time, it's, the 21st in Greenwich, just 51 minutes after midnight, but then Pluto finally enters into, so east of there, it's the 21st, but here in North America, it is true, it will still be in the evening on the 20th in varying degrees, not late evening, actually, especially not for the West Coast or Hawaii. It's 8, 9, 10 hours, earlier in the day. So, we're kind of dealing with like 11 and 12 and 1 p.m. when it happens. So it's a lot of information, but the main thing to understand is that while the Sun and Pluto are close within degree, and that does matter, technically the exact conjunction occurred in Capricorn. That's the takeaway. So, but it's a kind of a double whammy in a way, because they are so close and have been hovering for the past few days in such close proximity that it's a buildup of their shared energy. It's true, but still, it's very important to remember that the technical exactitude of when the conjunction occurs is the key takeaway. So that's the main thing. What's really significant about this this ingress of Pluto into Aquarius in particular, even though the sun's there, and that's the key message of it, which is saying, here we go, folks, and it's a time of like future cometh energy in a big way. Now, it is true that Uranus, which rules Aquarius, is in Taurus. Okay, so again, remember, I said we look at the ruling planet for Aquarius. Saturn, by the way, is the traditional ruler, so it's known as the co-ruler, so we can certainly also look at Saturn over the entire time of 20 years while Pluto's in Aquarius. Some astrologers really, honor that traditional placement of Saturn being the traditional ruler of Aquarius and the modern being Uranus, so they will go with both. Some will stick with Saturn alone, but most Western astrologers will acknowledge that no, Uranus is the modern ruler, etc. So there's a few ways of looking at it, and it goes like that. There's an interpretive, aspect to it all. The main thing to know is that if we were to look at Pisces, okay, like Saturn ruling Aquarius in Pisces, it is disposited by Neptune, and they're together, and they again represent the dissolution, the disintegration of the old guard, the old order, the old, foundations in varying degrees, okay? So it's not entirely, and it's a process. Remember, Pluto will be there for 20 years. Saturn and Neptune will be in Aries for yet another couple of years or so, okay? So that's a fairly long time for them to do what they're destined to do, okay? So, which is, once again, the Piscean factor being disintegration. And, disintegration is the, you don't want to kind of break those words up to get a clearer sense of what's being said there. And so it's this real interesting kind of dynamic of the melting and disintegration of the old. Now, the other thing here is Uranus in Taurus. What's rather exciting about that, among other things, and one of them being that Uranus is forming a wide, but still a trine to Mars, and because it's in conjunction with Mercury, they're kind of working together in a trine to Uranus. And on the other end, both are also trine to Jupiter. So they're sort of sitting in the middle, somewhat, of the Jupiter-Uranus wide, space, but both in the same sign. That would be called conjunct by sign, not by degree. And these two planets kind of find their trine point in the middle. And that's very significant and very positive. It's a very harmonious, positive thing. It represents rebuilding at best. It's very practical, very sober. Also, Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus in this chart is beautifully placed, very closely conjunct the galactic center from the Earth's perspective, which is about 2738 of Sagittarius. So Venus being within a degree of exact to the galactic center is also a very promising, auspicious indication of a spiritual theme at play. And it itself, by the way, it's interesting and important to note, is in mutual reception with Jupiter. That's another positive. Okay, so Venus in Sag is ruled, is in the sign that Jupiter rules, and Jupiter's in the sign that Venus rules, so we have mutual reception. Very, very nice. Neptune in this chart is what's called the final dispositor, so it's the planet in its own sign. So that's another indication of sort of this mystical initiation, spiritual initiation theme that's at play. So that's also a factor to consider in the whole dynamic. And we see that in the world. There's like a process of a part of the old guard, and the old order would be, old religious convictions, old traditional mindsets regarding beliefs and so forth in many aspects of life, but among them the religious. And I say that partially because Neptune's a very, very spiritual planet. So it's kind of like a disintegration of the old dogmas. That's what would be represented by the Capricorn, the theology, the dogmas, which are very strong, especially in the Western, religions which are very patriarchal. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are very patriarchal. God is a man principle, and it comes with a lot of you must obey and be very, very frightened kind of consciousness. Do or die. Very male, not empathetic and female, but very stern, and notions of the furly-browed god. Zeus figure is in there, so there's that. Now, the other little factor is Chiron conjunct the North Node, still very significant. So we're being pulled to that the North Node in Aries in the first house is very much a theme of reinvention. Okay, so we're being asked to kind of reconsider who we are, how we are, why we are, what we are, and that's definitely happening on the airwaves out there as the information age that the Aquarian age is symbolic of rages on. There's a lot of knowledge being put out there with various channels, let's say like Gaia, for example. Gaia TV is one of them, but you just go to YouTube, and if you really want to look into spiritual, metaphysical perspectives or challenges to standard and orthodox notions of history is a big thing. So there's a real lot of new consciousness coming in from the quantum world, the mystical world, the religious, spiritual world, the archaeological, historical. Every angle of consciousness is coming forward to shake us into new perspectives. And that's a big, beautiful thing of the rebuilding. And yes, a healing of our identity, which at worst in a conspiracy sort of theory way is sort of been hijacked just by various powers that be, and just the way it is among us humans that we are kind of, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You can go on and on about it, but it's just like that. It's just the way it is. It's kind of the way we are. Maybe we would be like them, quote unquote, if we had the old family power, etc. As souls, we incarnate, we reincarnate, so we pop into these family lineages, but it doesn't mean we're going to be there forever. So we kind of play a role every time we incarnate, and we might find ourselves in an ancient bloodline, for example, and we have some kind of role to play, some kind of lesson to learn, some sort of, invariably some contribution to be made, and it's all relative at that stage. But the main thing to understand is that the healing of identity on a global scale, we are humans. And all kinds of debates will come forward. What does that mean? Are we spiritual beings having human experiences? Were we gene spliced by aliens? What's exactly going on? Do we come from apes? And it goes on, and these debates are raging along. Some people kind of are very blasé and matter-of-fact and assumptive, in my opinion, about that. I think it's very wise to keep an open mind about all of that. And that's a big part of what this whole 20-year cycle is about, is a reconsideration of who and what we are. And it's a big emphasis on new information coming in to help us to enter into new dialogues, new discussions, new considerations, so that we're not just being told who and what we are by orthodoxies and corrupt institutions and powers that be that kind of, at worst, hide from us. So this is all a part of the theme of Aquarius, which is a shaker. It wants to awaken. It wants to illuminate. It wants to revolutionize. It wants to, in effect, at least orients itself to a sort of a leveling of the playing field, as would be true in a massive hurricane, right? For example, it does no longer matter what kind of house you have or how wealthy you are specifically, it's going to level it. And if it's in its path, sort of thing. Now, one last thing about this more recent Pluto ingress into Aquarius is that the moon is in trine to it, which is wonderful. Thank you very much. The trine is a very inspirational, creative, uplifting, energetic aspect. The moon in Gemini is a little tricky, though. It's not terribly stable. It's known as an unstable position at worst for the moon, very multifaceted. However, the trine helps a lot. And the very fact that it is in Gemini and Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini, is in Capricorn, helps. Okay, that's a helpful factor because it stabilizes it, so we're good there. The one thing about the moon, though, is it is square to Saturn. That is a bit more difficult. That means that the disintegration process that Saturn in Pisces represents won't be so easy, but it's going to happen anyway, and we're going to have to sort of stay calm, you might say. Our challenge will be not to allow hysteria or instinctual survival fears to get the better of us, so we become very reactive and very unstable, which are all possibilities. But it does generally suggest that, these themes will be at play. So, okay, there's a lot of insight there. I know I'm just trying my best to give you a wider spectrum of considerations about what's going on, so it doesn't become so narrow and vague, which is, people are throwing out comments about how it's going to be and tumultuous and revolutionary and violent and so forth. And I can't say that's not true at all. And just by what I'm saying, it might make sense, but there's a deeper purpose at play. And I want to bring attention to that, not in a Pollyanna sense, but in a optimistic sense on the high side, where we recognize that it is all purposeful. And, it's just the way it is. It's just who we are and as a collective and where we are at. That's a good way of looking at it. So it's not about blame and judgment, and the synchronicities will invariably manifest in all kinds of ways, and various players will come forward. Not every one of them will, on the world stage, be as popular as others. They may be famous, they may be infamous, but they're going to play a role, and it's all part of what we could call the game. Okay, now I'm going to look a little further down the field when Pluto re-enters Capricorn again, which occurs on September the 1st. Okay, so once again, it's always a matter of where you are. So on September 2nd in Greenwich and east of on the planet, but here in North America on the 1st, by one click, I'll show you there is Pluto enters Capricorn. So it does it early in the morning in Greenwich, but of course here in North America, it's either, the evening, or on the West Coast, it's even earlier in the afternoon. So, Pluto will re-enter Capricorn again, September 1st or 2nd, depending where you are on the planet, 2024. I'm not going to get lost too much into the ingress of Pluto back into Capricorn, although it will play its own minor role as the last time Pluto will be in Capricorn. Okay, it'll stay there until November 19th, which I'm going to show you in a moment, but then once it enters Aquarius, finally, once again, for the third time, it will take until 2255 when it enters Capricorn again. Okay, so it's just something to be aware of. It's a big, long period of time, of course. But yeah, it goes in that fashion. So the main thing for us to understand here now is that we're looking at Pluto moving through Capricorn from the 2nd. So I'm going to click watch the moon move. Okay, in particular, as I move forward one day at a time, you'll see the sun, moon, Venus, the fast moving planets will be clipping along. Each clip is one day. Okay, so we're at September 13th. There's a few factors that are going on here, especially with the fact that Pluto's about to, in early October, go direct again. Okay, so that happened on about the, there we go, about the 11th, 12th or something. Pluto stops in its retrograde, starts to move forward. By the way, it's important to note that when Pluto entered Capricorn, it did so and remained again at the 29th degree. Now, what's significant about that is the 29th degree, as I hinted earlier, but I'll elaborate more now, is that it's at the critical degree, which is a theme of slow, patient overcoming in the sign of governments. So it could be interpreted in a variety of ways that, first of all, governments will be challenged to stop the impulse, the revolutionary impulse of Aquarius, okay? That people aren't going to yield anymore to government authority at the ways that they have in the past. It's with Aquarius energy, it'll be bulldozer energy against that. So this is where things can get quite intense. So it will happen over the period of time already starting in January of 2024 as Pluto on the 21st enters Aquarius, and it goes through all the way until September 1st. Now, it's true that along the way, Pluto will have turned retrograde, and that again occurs in about June, and then slowly from there moves back again. It arrives to about 2 degrees of Aquarius. I could have showed you that, I kind of forgot, but the main thing is that Pluto moves to about 2 degrees of Aquarius in about 8 minutes. Then it retrogrades again, and that's where we see it here back in Capricorn, 2 degrees and 8 minutes of Aquarius, by the way, which is significant if you have planets at 0, 1, 2, even 3 degrees, but especially 1 and 2 degrees of any sign, you're going to experience the energy of Pluto in Aquarius, for better or worse. Okay, it'll do whatever it's destined to do, and you will respond to it accordingly with your free will, but by the probabilities of your destiny as well. Okay, it works that way. You still always do have free will, but your destiny and your nature and your circumstances are all features of probability about what you will do. And that does, by extension, enter into your relationship life and who you're connected to. So all of these are kind of factors that somewhat indirectly inhibit our free will, because, we're part of a larger reality. It's not just isolated island situation. So the main point, though, is I'm going to skip along to now Pluto's, as of, about October 10th, 11th, 12th, depending on, 11th or 12th, went direct, and now we're going to see that it's becoming November. There's the sun in Scorpio in November time, right? So we're in the later degrees. It's the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, and we're just at the last degree on the 19th in Greenwich. So it's already that day, but we're now going to see Pluto enter Aquarius for the last time in this, yes, it will stay in Aquarius for 20 years, but it will not enter Capricorn again. But so there's no more back and forth, retrograding back into Capricorn, which has been in a whole dynamic process. I'm hinting at it, but there's a lot to be said about what it, we can go on and on, one can talk about it. It need not be talked about too much. It's just that is all part of the larger fabric of it, and it's kind of icky picky at worst to get into these finer details, but at best this last ingress tells us something again when we look at the ingress chart. So the first two were actually quite good, kind of really auspicious, and they show some positives. If some dramatic themes, there was a lot of good positive themes at play. Now here we again have Pluto in Aquarius once again, finally November 19th, 2024. At the time the sun is in Scorpio, adding to it because Pluto's the planet that rules Scorpio. So the fact that the sun's in Scorpio is significant, okay? The very fact that when Pluto entered Aquarius in January of 2024, the sun was in Aquarius, so it has this Aquarian theme. No sign's really better than any other sign, they're just different. And Aquarius itself can be very revolutionary and violent. Scorpio, being the sign of death and rebirth, etc., tends to be associated that way, but it shouldn't be necessarily. Now, but it is a deep and powerful and rather intense sign, though, the sign of death, rebirth, regeneration, transformation, etc., Scorpio. And so it is very playing a key role connecting to each other. Now, another factor here is that Uranus is in Taurus there, right? So we wonder, okay, that's significant. Where's Venus that rules Taurus? Up in Capricorn. So what that represents is probably governments working to find new ways to transition the disintegration process that will be underway. They're going to try, that's on a positive side of things. They'll be looking for opportunities to transition the energy from what the old guard and order to the new. It probably won't be a terribly easy job for those in power in whatever ways. And some of those people are invariably themselves compromised, corrupt individuals. But, in the bigger picture, it's kind of like somewhat par for the course. It's kind of a global situation. But with the Aquarian energy, it's this very revolutionary impulse to clear away old corruptions. So that's part of the whole dynamic that we're going to be experiencing. Now, by this time, Mars, all the while, is in Leo, opposing Pluto. That's quite a powerful aspect, by the way. And it technically doesn't easily and obviously have a release valve. That would mean an apex planet. That would be somewhere in the early degrees of Scorpio or Taurus, but they're not there. So that tug of war is kind of difficult at worst because it shows a tense situation without an obvious outlet. So it's kind of slightly in stalemate. And Mars in Leo here, well, it just basically comes down to a fair amount of drama at worst. People invariably in their ego instinctual survival reaction to things could make things a little crazy. And the moon in the chart is part of that whole dynamic, because we always have to look at the moon with the sun all the time. It's in Cancer, which is linked to home, family, security. So it's kind of undergoing its own challenges, but that will be the main interest of people, and things could get a little dramatic in regards to the changes that are invariably coming. And meanwhile, the moon is in a tight square to Chiron, which is not easy neither. So there's a whole dynamic of people perhaps in their instinctual survival impulses rationalizing and justifying behaviors that may not be appropriate and or civil or anything like of that sort. So that's the danger at worst of that Mars opposing Pluto factor. And with Mercury in Sagittarius, it's could, both being fire signs and Chiron there, and the North Node, no less, still in the Aries and asking for reinvention, it could get a little complicated at worst. So now the thing to understand is that Pluto enters Aquarius 3 times. It enters in March of 2023. It enters in January, March 23rd, 2023 to be exact, January 21st, depending where you are on the planet, 2024, and November 19th or so. Maybe it could be the 20th in some places, probably in the Far East, in fact, yes. But the main point is, yes, that will be the 3rd time Pluto will enter Aquarius. So what we have, therefore, are what can be described as 3 ingress charts. Now, it's a bit complicated to know how to determine their role, but each of them hosts themes that I've been outlining for you. And the first 2, interestingly enough, are somewhat positive, really. It shows, but this one's not without positives, but it's sort of more complicated It's as though we're later in the game and there's more difficulty. Things are kind of becoming unraveled. That's partially indicated, by the way, by Jupiter in Gemini, retrograde at the time. Jupiter in Gemini is not so easily placed, just as is Mercury in Sagittarius. Both of them represent sort of feeling scattered and unfocused and unstable. However, Mercury is fortunately in mutual reception with Jupiter. So that is fortunate that we have that they are supportive of each other. And you'll notice that they are in opposition, but they are squaring, at least Jupiter is, but in a way, Mercury, it's a wide square to Saturn. It somewhat applies, but the main thing is there's a square to Saturn, which means the release valve Saturn, which is in Pisces at that particular degree is not easy. Okay, that's a difficult degree. So this third chart of the three really is the one that would maybe, from my perspective, be the most disconcerting, the one that would make me the most nervous. And we're left to wonder at what scale of how long or what role will the first one, the second one, and the third one, and I'm referring to the Ingress charts, how will they play out? And that's not an easy answer. It's not easy even among astrologers. It's kind of a situation where it may be over the span of years that each one plays a key role. But that's just one way of looking at it. The whole other way is simply as Pluto moves ahead through the sign of Aquarius and makes transits, or planets form transit aspects to it. And that's usually the case because it's the slower moving of all the planets. So as planets, Pluto moves along and enters the new sectors of the sign of Aquarius and planets make aspects to it. That's another way of looking at the whole outer dynamic. But these ingress charts are significant. They are going to play key roles. They represent the whole dynamic in a bigger picture, which at best is the revolutionizing the old order, which makes sense given the way modern technology has emerged to where it is. There'll be some rebuilding, some disintegration, a real revolutionary impulse and very, wonderful positive aspects to it. This one has some positives, and, especially, the mutual reception and in the moon in Cancer, which is sort of positively speaking, sort of people reaching out to help each other. There'll be an empathetic aspect. But the very fact also that the sun, Cancer, is the sign of empathy, and it's in the decant and duad of Pisces, so it brings out a compassionate, empathetic, let's not just, let's take care of each other principle. So that's a positive indeed. And that's a part of us rediscovering who we are in our deeper humanity at best. The fact that the sun is the planet of highest degree in this chart in trine to Neptune is positive in a spiritual regard. Okay, that's good. I think it's part of the initiation principle I was speaking of with the fact that the winter solstice occurs in a 2023 year. So the winter solstice of 2024 occurs technically in 2023. So I've come to believe that creates a numerological theme that is anchored in what's called the natural new year or winter solstice. Okay, it's kind of a bit of a thing, and I did a video on it, so you can go check that out as well. The play on the overlap of the numbers of the 7 referring to winter solstice and the 8 referring to the actual year 2024 when added equals 8. Okay, so they're to play together. And there's more to say about that, but I'll just keep it brief to mention it. So this whole chart is a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more scattered. With the sun in Scorpio at the highest degree, that means at the end of the day, this. And that means at the end of the day, a transformational death and rebirth dynamic. So now it's very possible, not sure about this, but the entire 20-year period hypothetically can be divided by approximately three ingresses. So that means that they could, I'm not sure about this, but theoretical, but play out about a 7-year period each. So it would be the last of the 7 years that would be the most complex. By then, society will have changed significantly. It will still be in a very tumultuous, revolutionary reset process. And things over the years, the 14 years leading up to it, could be quite, destabilizing at worst and intense. And so I hope that's not true. It's not a hard prediction I'm making. I'm just making a suggestion that there's a possibility that it could play out that way. Okay, 3 periods of about just shy of 7 years each. Okay, so there you go. There's some insights for you about Pluto in Aquarius, and we're looking at it from the whole chart perspective. There's a lot of information there, I appreciate, but you can listen to this again if you need to, but you got a gist of it. And so there you go, a little insight for you in a broader sense, showing the core archetypal purpose and some of the dynamics at play. So thank you for being here, and take care and keep well with Pluto entering Aquarius, and especially here in 2024. But remember, it will be largely in 2025 when it completes its final sweep. Because this ingress occurs on November 19th. So right at the end of 2024, when finally it's there. And there's other real big realities, especially with Saturn and Neptune entering Aries within the next couple of years. Uranus will enter Gemini, Jupiter will enter Cancer. There's all the far planets will be in new signs, and a little bit later Chiron will itself entering Taurus. So all the far planets over the next couple of years will be entering new signs, and that's a whole other story. But this is its own lead up to it. So yeah, we're in definitely apocalyptic times, shall we say. So there you go. Thank you for being here. I hope you got some good insights and takeaways from all of this. See you next time. Oh, on a very final note, I invite you to visit my website, sunstarastrology.com, and look under the library, and you'll see a heading for master classes and courses. You'll also see there under horoscopes the opportunity to get the horoscope that I do each week for free, or you can get the members version, which is longer and has deeper interpretations and includes monthly and yearly forecasts as well. So the master classes is the main message I want to share with you, though, coming up, and there's a few that you might really like. That one of them, which is called, the understanding multidimensionality and how synchronicity works, and there's another one, it happens to be called Understanding the Age of Aquarius. So if those themes interest you, please get in touch with me and at least get on my email list so you're going to be informed about when they will occur, which is not far away from now in February. Okay, thank you again for being here, and take care.